What's up, everybody? Nate here. So tax season in the United States is starting to come to an end, which reminds me, if you haven't paid your taxes yet, you might want to do that. And while nobody in the United States likes paying taxes, they are pretty essential to the health of our economy, just like having a really strong workforce and paying $13 for a craft beer at pretty much any sporting event or concert in the United States. I mean, these arenas have to be making a killing, right? But over the last couple of years, taxes in the United States have been pretty funky. I mean, we had child tax credits, stimulus payments, and a bunch of other things that were kind of throwing off how much Americans were going to get for their refunds. Not only that, but with all of these new changes and pushing back deadlines in 2020 and in 2021, the IRS is pretty behind on its tax returns. In fact, at the beginning of this year, they were saying that tax returns were going to be delayed, so you better get them in early. But now, President Joe Biden and the United States federal government has started to make some changes to IRS policies and, more importantly, their funding. So the IRS has gotten a brand new multi-billion-dollar funding bill that has allowed it to sort of solve a lot of its problems with tax returns in 2022. And not only that, but tax return philosophy is changing for many Americans in the United States, with almost 50% of Americans saying that they're going to save their tax return instead of spend it or invest it in 2022. So today, I want to talk all about taxes. I want to talk about the IRS and these brand new bills that are supposedly going to give more funding to the organization. In addition, I want to go over what Americans plan to do with their taxes later on in this year and how that is a pretty big shift in how things have gone over the past decade or so. But before I get into all of that, do me a quick favor and hit, smash, or destroy that thumbs up button below, and bring that notification bell too. Both of those two things are completely free and they help to show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. Thank you so much for doing that. And now let's talk all about everyone's favorite subject, taxes. Okay, so taxes are not fun, and for the majority of Americans, they're actually pretty confusing. What the heck is a write-off? But regardless, it's something that pretty much everyone in the United States has to do, unless you're like Amazon or something. But for a very long time in the United States, people were filing their tax returns and the IRS has not been able to process them properly. In fact, as of 2022, the IRS is still processing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of refunds all the way back from 2020. So next time you feel behind in life, just think about the IRS. Now, part of the reason why they're so behind is lack of funding, which has made it really hard for the federal government to get a lot of the tax revenue that it needs to sustain our economy. More importantly, that means less staffing and less infrastructure for the IRS, which means they're not going to be able to catch as many mistakes and they're not going to be able to catch as many people trying to potentially evade taxes. For regular everyday Americans, that means your tax return is most likely going to be late. Now, the IRS has made an announcement in 2022 that they're starting to make some changes to their organization that will hopefully help get refunds out a lot faster. And earlier this week, President Joe Biden signed a bill that increased the IRS's budget to $12.6 billion in 2022. That is a whole 6% higher than what we saw in 2021. And according to the IRS Commissioner Charles Riddick, this is going to immediately solve all of the IRS's problems. The first thing that the commissioner said was this is going to completely clear the entire IRS's backlog of tax returns. Like I said, they have tax returns dating all the way back to 2020 and in some cases even 2019. What they're able to do now is hire more workers and train more staff. Now, in my opinion, I'm not sure how this is going to solve 2022's tax season simply because we're already pretty much done with it. And it takes time to hire people and then fully train them. I mean, you can't just throw anybody in the IRS and hope they're going to be able to process tax returns. But it is a good start. And the IRS doesn't just simply end its job once tax season is over. They continue all throughout the year and they should be able to start working through refunds in 2022 and previous years. In addition, more funding to the IRS allows them to catch tax evasion and tax fraud in the United States. And it allows them to work a lot closely with Congress when making new tax rules. Now, of course, the regular everyday consumer is not going to be happy about paying more taxes. But honestly, this is just the way it's going to be. Taxes is the only way the United States government actually makes money. They really have no other revenue sources other than taxes. If they don't get enough taxes in, then they have to print even more money. money. And while that kind of fixes government issues, it causes a lot more problems for everyday citizens. Mainly because inflation continues to go through the roof. As you print more money, more people have more money to spend, which means they can buy more, which means companies have to produce more, and that comes at a cost to them, so prices ultimately go up. That all comes from just simply printing more money. And that's what the United States has to do if it runs a massive deficit. Now, it's pretty clear the United States government is always going to have some sort of budget deficit because it simply does way too much for the amount of money that it actually brings in. But according to the commissioner of the IRS, having a healthy IRS is super important to the continued success of the United States. I mean, in theory, it's important that taxes are done correctly because taxes are for everyone. Taxes go towards specific funds in the United States that help build up our infrastructure and our local communities. I mean, of course, we can go back and forth on whether or not some of the things that our lawmakers do with taxes is a good idea. I mean, the United States government and governments around the country have to find some way to fund their areas. But now with this brand new bill, we can start to see some improvements to the IRS. So taxes hopefully won't be as difficult for many Americans as they were over the past few years. I mean, even though everyone has to pay taxes, that doesn't mean they need to be difficult. Now let's talk about what goes on after taxes. So obviously the IRS is improving its own infrastructure so that it can get refunds out faster to Americans. The reason that the IRS cares so much about that is because the quicker they can get those refunds out, the quicker Americans can do something with that cash. Americans having money is important. That's why we printed trillions of additional dollars in 2020 and in 2021 to help us out through the pandemic. Nobody really knew how long the pandemic was going to last for, and nobody really knew how long the economic lockdowns were going to be in place. If people weren't working, then they couldn't exactly get a paycheck, which means businesses can't get money and they can't pay their people. As you can see, it's just a big problem. When you have nobody getting money, you have nobody spending money in general, and the IRS knows that the faster they can get those refunds out, the faster that Americans can start spending money. However, the trend in 2022 is not that Americans are going to go out and spend all of this refund. According to a poll by CNBC, around 46% of Americans are actually planning on saving their tax refund. 37% actually want to pay off debt, 22% are going to use it towards some type of household expense, and 9% are going to use it for investing. The rest of it is all about consumer spending, with 8% of Americans saying they're going to splurge on something that they've wanted, and another 8% saying that they're going to book a lavish vacation. Now, this is actually pretty crazy because this number of saving is actually up from 2020 and in 2021. 40% of Americans in 2020 said they were going to save their tax refund, and 41% of Americans in 2021 said they were going to save it as well. That number has now jumped up to 46%. So what exactly is going on here? Do Americans just not want to spend any money anymore? Well, I think over the last 2 years, we have had a big psychological shift in how Americans interact with money. Because of the pandemic and now all of the financial issues that we're facing, Americans know the value of saving money, at least for the most part. Around 15% of all Americans were unemployed during the pandemic. That is a high that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. So with Americans not working and a lot of them not having any savings, this was a big struggle. It's part of the reason why the federal government had to step in the first place. I mean, of course, we can go back and forth on whether the federal government should have printed trillions of additional dollars in order to bail out companies and the everyday American. But the fact of the matter is, companies and Americans didn't have any savings, so it's worse for the United States federal government if nobody is spending. They'd rather people have some money, even if it means inflation is going up. Americans, for the most part, went out and spent that stimulus, but after a while and after having now years of these financial issues, Americans are starting to wise up and they're starting to put their money in a savings account. Their tax refund is a great way to do that because for a lot of people, it's thousands of additional dollars. And then for the most part, Americans then plan plan to pay off debts and then pay off some household expenses. This is because for the majority of Americans, your tax refund is the biggest check you're going to get all year. So spending it by cutting down some of your debt or paying off some of your house or doing something that actually makes financial sense for you is gonna work out for the long term. And it seems right now, the younger you are, the more likely you're going to put your money into savings. According to this poll, around 60% of Gen Z plans to put their refund into a savings account, followed by 47% of millennials and then 41% of boomers. And Gen Z is most likely to invest this money out of all other generations, according to this poll. And I think that is super important to our country today and something that doesn't really get talked a lot about when we talk about money, business, and finance. Younger generations are starting to invest more, and they're starting to learn that they can make money in a lot of different ways other than just going to a job. Younger generations are getting more and more creative about how they make their money. It's part of the reason why we've seen the Great Resignation boom over the last year or so. Americans aren't just looking for the traditional American lifestyle anymore. They don't want to just go to school, get their degree, and then get into a job that they might not necessarily like. Americans are going out and sure, a lot of them are working, but a lot of them are going after their passion and then building wealth through things like the stock market or real estate. More than ever before, Americans have more opportunities to learn about investing and building wealth that they didn't have generations prior. I mean, for my parents' generation, in order to invest, you literally had to have a broker and you were going to pay hundreds of dollars in fees every single time you invested. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. You can literally download a free app, pay no fees, and start building wealth right now. And I think that is an awesome thing. We're starting to see that financial shift in the United States. And I think too, just for generations and the current status of our country, inflation is really high and things cost a lot right now, more than they did in 2020 and in 2021 on average. So Americans know the value of a dollar. They want to start saving to protect themselves because we don't really know what is going to happen next. Our economy is in a really fragile space with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates and inflation at record highs. Nobody really knows what exactly is coming next. And it looks like Gen Z and millennials are preparing for something that could be coming next. Now, I'm not talking about a full-blown economic collapse, but it could be something like the housing market starting to come down, or they could be investing for their future. They're preparing, and I love to see it. And to kind of tie all of these things together, the IRS being a little bit stronger isn't necessarily a bad thing, because in theory, if we can get everybody to pay their fair share in taxes, well, then the entire country won't have to pay as much individually. Our tax code is constantly changing, and it's never fun to have to pay taxes because we don't always directly see the results from those taxes. And yes, I personally think that we do need to see some reform in the tax industry, but I think that refunds for everyday Americans are a really powerful tool. And it's awesome to see Americans using those tax refunds effectively instead of the majority of them just going out and blowing that money. So we'll see how all this kind of shapes up. I'm interested to see what the budget for the IRS is going to be in 2023. You got to remember too, inflation is a little bit higher, so the budget is also going to have to be higher for the IRS. We'll see if that actually helps or hurts millions of Americans all throughout the country. But one thing is for sure, Americans are becoming more financially educated right now than they pretty much ever have. There is pretty much no cons to that at all. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about President Joe Biden's new bill to increase the IRS's budget in 2022? In addition, what do you think about Americans actually saving the majority of their refund instead of spending it this year? Do you think that's going to continue to be a common trend, or do you think that eventually Americans will go back to spending every dime of their tax return? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out updates 7 days a week over here on this channel, and I've actually got another one ready for you right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.